There was a time when one company ruled movie nights. This company had more power than Hollywood. They could make or break movies. And every Friday night, millions of people made their way to the store. It was like a religion. But then everything changed. People stopped going to the store. Movies became available with a click of a button. And today, this company has disappeared. So here's how Blockbuster went from king of home entertainment to becoming a museum piece. And let me tell you, this story starts out really boring before taking a turn for the worst. But trust me, you really gonna want to hear this story, because it will help you avoid making the same mistakes they did. Taking a look back, our story begins in 1985 in Dallas, Texas. At the time, the video rental market was dominated by small mom-and-pop shops. But that would soon change when a man named David Cook entered the scene. You see, David wasn't your typical entrepreneur. He didn't have much money, so he couldn't just start a normal business, but he had something even better: hustle. And if there's one thing we know about entrepreneurs, it's that they always find a way. So after working odd jobs, saving up money, and enlisting the help of his mother and brother, but honestly, these tactics alone wouldn't have been enough to beat out thousands of mom-and-pop shops. But David knew one thing: consistency. While others were closed on Sundays and moved at a snail's pace, Blockbuster was open 7 days a week, and they prioritized customer service. It wasn't long until Blockbuster became the go-to video rental spot. But David wasn't done yet. In the late 1980s, he partnered up with a local cable TV company and began marketing to their subscribers, offering discounts to anyone who signed up. And since cable companies reached millions of homes, this allowed Blockbuster to grow exponentially. Pretty soon, waiting in line at Blockbuster became a Friday night tradition. Kids would help their parents pick out a movie. They'd walk home with their new family-friendly selection. They'd pop the VHS into the player and spend the night enjoying a movie together. For a while, nothing stood in Blockbuster's way. By the end of the 1980s, they had 180 stores and had become the fastest growing company in America. Seeing this success, David decided to take the business public. But little did he know this would be the biggest mistake of his life. You see, going public helped them raise a ton of money initially, but it came at a cost. Now David had to do whatever it took to keep shareholders happy. And this would quickly spiral out of control. Just 3 years after going public, Blockbuster expanded overseas. They continued opening new stores. They introduced pizza deliveries, and they even bought out competing chains. By 1994, they had over 9,000 stores worldwide and 65 million customers. To put this in perspective, Blockbuster had more customers than the population of France. And with all these customers coming in every week, they generated $11 billion in revenue. Of course, this revenue wasn't exactly clean. In fact, the dirtiest part of Blockbuster was the late fees. If you didn't return a movie on time, you had to pay a fee. And trust me when I say that this was a massive source of income. Blockbuster collected over $800 million in late fees each year. In fact, analysts estimated that 30% of all revenue came from late fees. And Blockbuster knew this might not last forever. So they tried to milk it for as long as possible. This brings us into the first threat to Blockbuster, which was Netflix. Now, I'm sure you know what Netflix is, but back in 1997, it was just a small startup trying to disrupt the movie industry. Rather than mailing DVDs via the US Postal Service, Netflix wanted to do it themselves. So they developed their own delivery network and paired it with a subscription model. So for a monthly fee, you could rent as many movies as you wanted. On top of that, they didn't charge any late fees. Can you imagine? But this was music to the ears of frugal moviegoers. And before long, Netflix started gaining popularity. In the year 2000, Reed Hastings, the founder of Netflix, offered to buy out Blockbuster for $50 million. And when he showed up to the meeting, Blockbuster executives literally laughed him out of the office. And to be honest, it makes sense why they rejected this offer. At the time, Netflix was just a small startup. Meanwhile, Blockbuster was the 800-pound gorilla in the room. They didn't have to worry about some small mail-order business. But unfortunately, this would soon change. You see, at the same time, technology was evolving at a rapid pace. The internet was growing faster than ever before, and customers were getting used to the convenience of the web. This brings us into the second mistake of Blockbuster, which was ignoring the writing on the wall. When Netflix first approached Blockbuster, it was obvious that things needed to change. Sure, Netflix wasn't a serious threat yet, but it was clear that technology was changing the world and Blockbuster needed to adapt. Instead, they just laughed off the idea of online movie rentals. They assumed that people would never stop coming into stores. But they were completely wrong. As the internet grew, more and more people started watching movies online. And this gave Netflix the opportunity to expand their services. In 2007, they launched streaming, which would eventually lead to their exponential growth. But with all this growth, Netflix needed more capital. So in 2006, they went public. And this move was like fuel to the fire. All of a sudden, Netflix had access to billions of dollars. They could afford to buy out competing companies. And most importantly, they could afford to bet on new technologies. All of this would put more pressure on Blockbuster. But they were still holding on. Their stores were still packed, and they still had the advantage. But Blockbuster failed to use this advantage. You see, Blockbuster did launch an online rental service called Blockbuster Online, but it was far too late. Netflix already had a strong foothold in the online market, and this is where Blockbuster made their final and biggest mistake. They thought they could compete with Netflix solely based on brand recognition. For years, Blockbuster had been the go-to destination for movies, and they assumed that people would automatically choose them just because they were Blockbuster. But this was a huge miscalculation. Customers didn't care about Blockbuster's brand. They simply wanted a good movie and the convenient way to get it. And once again, Netflix was already miles ahead. Not only did Netflix have the online market cornered, but they had a bunch of cash. So they decided to make a move on Blockbuster's turf, brick-and-mortar retail stores. From 2008 to 2010, Netflix opened over 60 standalone retail locations. And this was the beginning of the end for Blockbuster. In 2010, Blockbuster filed for bankruptcy. Dish Network saw this as an opportunity to get into the retail business. So they bought Blockbuster out of bankruptcy for $320 million. But even they couldn't save the company. By 2013, 80% of Blockbuster stores were gone. And today, there's only one store left standing in Bend, Oregon. Looking back, it's safe to say that Blockbuster had its time in the sun. They brought families together through movies, and gave us countless Friday nights to remember. But the harsh reality is that Blockbuster got greedy. They clung on for too long. And ultimately they lost sight of what made them successful in the first place: customer service. Now, on the other hand, we have Netflix. The company that Blockbuster laughed out of the office is now worth hundreds of billions of dollars. As of today, they're the biggest entertainment company in the world. They've displaced traditional television. They've become the go-to destination for movies and shows. And it's likely that this trend will continue for many years into the future. It's incredible how Blockbuster went from laughing at Netflix to being absorbed by Netflix. We might even see Netflix buy out the last Blockbuster store. Time will tell. But one thing is for certain: the rise and fall of Blockbuster is a story that we should all remember. Do you guys remember going to Blockbuster? Comment that down below. Also drop a like if you're glad that they're still keeping the one store open. And of course, consider checking out our international channels to watch our videos in other languages, and consider subscribing to see more questions logically answered. But until then, I'll see you guys on the next one.